Shalom, everyone. Today I'm rather excited as I get to do a reading and critical analysis of my favorite poem of all time, arguably one of the best poems of all time, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And it's going to be a treat for myself as it just so happens to be my born day today. And the irony of this is I have this wonderful painting that my wife made for me my last born day, and it's the raven spelling out nevermore with its being. And also you have this capital N here standing for Nakaraya. Isn't that nice? Alright, so that being said, I'm going to just have this painting here as we read the poem. I'm going to try not to geek out for an hour straight, even though I probably could. I'm going to try to make this nice and sweet, and I'll give my thoughts on this as we go. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. The rhyme scheme is just so insane for this poem, dude. It's crazy. Rapping at my chamber door. Yep. Okay, perfect. So you may notice throughout the longevity of this poem that a lot of it I have memorized. Why do I love this poem so much? It's just so rhythmic. It's very dark. I tend to like darker literature if it's more so poetry, because it tends to have a little bit more meaning to it. I'm not really big on like reading poems about sunshines and rainbows. But let's keep going. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Yep. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. So we know that Lenore is the woman of question and interest and love figure, you could say, of the poet. You might say Edgar Allan Poe. I like to call him just the poet because he's nameless. He's the real one who's nameless here forevermore, it seems. We know the name of Lenore, and we know the name of the Raven. We don't seem to know this character, and I think that there's an irony to that. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there and nothing more." So what's happening here is the poet is in this chamber. I like that he calls it a chamber because, yes, that is the old-fashioned English for saying room or dwelling. But we also know that to be what you would identify with a prison or a place of captivity And I think that it's a double entendre because we soon find out that this poet is suffering from severe depression, and that sort of chronic depression can be manifest within that room as like an imprisonment. And as we'll see later on, it seems to be a life sentence or a death sentence for life, at least in the figurative or metaphorical sense. Deep into that dark... Oh, okay. But so he hears this knocking at the door. He goes to open it. He has no idea who it is. And then he takes a minute to reflect on this poem that we're reading right now. So the idea is he wrote this poem after the events, obviously took place. And this is a reflection. I think that that's interesting to think about. And so he opened the door and there was nothing there. No one was at the door. So then the question becomes, who the hell was at the door, right? There's a lot of theories out there. I like to think about it being the lost soul of Lenore that's indefinitely beckoning his soul because she can't rest, however in ways in which she died may have caused that. Okay, so deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then where thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more. Again, the bars, the lattice, what thereat is, that's insane. That's just insane, dude. I love it. Okay. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven. Oh, wait. No, let's read that all in one go because you have to keep that rhyme scheme's chain afloat. Okay. 'Tis the wind and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. So the raven is at this window, and he lets, or something's tapping at the window. He opens the window, and this raven comes in. I just want you guys to understand how terrifying that is, because ravens are huge. Ravens are not crows; they're corvids, but they're also my second favorite animal, by the way. And they are about the size of a hawk. Yeah, they're pretty chunky birds, let's say. So imagine opening your window and a bird like this wide just steps in. It's all black, it's kind of terrifying. I'd be pretty scared. Anyways, so the raven comes in and then he just flies into his chamber and he perches upon the bust of Pallas. Bust is just a older fashioned word for statue of from the head to like the below the collarbone, if I'm not mistaken. And it's above Pallas, which I think is the Roman god of like fertility or love or something like that. If I'm not mistaken as well. Which is also symbolic because of what the raven is going to say and how that relates to Lenore and the lost love or the severed love connection between the poet and Lenore. And if there's Balm in Gilead, of course. But we'll get to that. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Very, very interesting that he says nevermore to that. Like, when I first started reading this poem, I tried to uncover why the raven said nevermore in each context. Like, what is the contextual practicality of why nevermore fits every time he says it. And so right here, it's like ravens and crows are typically known as like bad omens, or at least omens nonetheless. And so I think to sort of separate that negative connotation with his already seemingly downtrodden fate, the poet that is, he tries to ignore this omen by downplaying it as something that doesn't really need to demand that much respect. And I think the raven is saying nevermore because perhaps that very behavior is what led to his downfall, maybe even the death of his wife, or at least Lenore, we don't know, right? So that's something to think about. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculpture bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, still I scarcely more than muttered. Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, Nevermore. It's interesting that the raven is so responsive. Just so you guys are aware, ravens are very, very intelligent. Corvids are intelligent in general, but ravens are... So crows are as intelligent as 6 to 7 year old humans. Ravens are as intelligent as 7 through 8 year old humans. So they're very, very intelligent. It's awesome to see it, how would you say, display discourse so plainly, as he says. And so right here, I think it's quite simple. I think the raven is just trying to simply object to the idea that, again, he bears little relevance. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. This is just a very convoluted, awesome, beautifully, tastefully, archaically done writing to say that ravens don't just speak just to speak. They're sort of like parrots in the sense that they learn sounds from things. So like humans, for example, or whoever master that he was in the presence of said nevermore enough for the raven to pick it up as a word. Usually ravens are capable of learning like 10 to 50 words, human words that is. And so it's also interesting that the raven only says nevermore. Aptly, as he says. Aptly simply means timely, or in an appropriate fashion. So, yes, I think that's very interesting. Let me see. Oh, did I lose my spot? Oh, okay. Startled at... Wait, no. Hello? Okay. But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling. And again, that's just him saying, like, he's letting go of all of his negative thoughts, and he's just taking the time to enjoy the moment. Like, what? There's this random bird. This flew into my chamber. This is crazy, right? That goes away very quickly. And I think that that's representing the prudency that we should aptly consist of within our lives. Okay. Straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lighting that the lamp lights gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamp lights gloating o'er, she shall press nevermore. So this is just talking about the scenery and how that reminds him of Lenore, because she's the woman who shall press nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfume from some unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So there's quite some depth here. I don't want this to be a too long video. I honestly just want to geek out. I don't want to, do a super critical analysis, let's say, but there's some stuff we have to break down here. So he says that he thought that the air grew denser, perfumed by an unseen censer swung by seraphim. Seraphim is an angel, of course. So now he's beginning to consider the idea that the situation in which he's encountering has spiritual implications, in which he has to respect the raven as some sort of omen or a messenger of some kind. And now he needs to find out what this message is. So he goes wretch, which is essentially a way of saying, like, oh God, or whoa, so it's like, I cried, thy God, speaking to the raven, hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee respite, and nepenthe. Nepenthe is it means like potion, elixir, in other words, sustenance that's for healing. Medicine, I guess you could say. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Nepenthe isn't medicine. And so it's a respite and medicine from thy memories of Lenore. So he's looking for an antidote for the depressing thoughts that are associated with his loss and his grief. And so he goes, quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe and forget this lost Lenore. Quaff just means drink. So drink, oh drink this kind medicine or elixir and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And that's the raven saying, and I mean, the raven's not saying anything, right? It's a raven. I don't think that the raven is that cognitively active and aware enough to have a full-on conversation with this man. But it could be. This could be, a fiction poem, and maybe that's the case. Who knows? I love talking to people about this poem. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, if you guys are still around. Okay. Okay, perfect. But yeah, the raven is simply telling him that, there's no getting rid of your grief. There's no nepenthe for it. there's no getting rid of the memories. You need to go through it, if you go through it at all. And if you don't go through it, you will die here. Or at least part of you will die here. And that part of you that could live will exist nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror hunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Is there balm in Gilead is a archaic way of asking if there's light at the end of the tunnel, and the raven says nevermore. And I don't think that the raven is being totally honest here. I think the raven is adding the understanding that if the poet stays in the mental state that he stays in, which is this understanding that there is an nepenthe out there, there's something exterior that can be done to relieve me of my worries of Lenore, besides me dealing with the grief within myself and moving on in a healthy fashion, even though it's very difficult to do. If you don't get out of that state of mind, if you don't try to improve your situation, then no, there is no balm in Gilead. Nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend? I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest at that night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume of a token as that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that... Oh, wow. That's crazy. Anyways, and the raven, never flirting, still is sitting upon the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamp light o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. And that's the poem. I just love this poem so much. I really, really do. I'm not gonna hold it. I'm sorry, I had 23 minutes. I'm not gonna hold this video too long. Originally, I thought I would just read it. Now I just, read it with no errors or anything like that and just post that. But I like talking about this poem, and trust me, I'm not gonna go into everything, because I could literally go on here for an hour and then nobody would enjoy that, except for me, of course. So that's gonna be it. I guess the moral of the story is to be cognizant of your surroundings and pay attention to the things that deserve its proper respect, and that will serve you for prudence in the future. And if you're dealing with grief, you must deal with it, as difficult as that might be. And the alternative is there not being balm in Gilead. And so we don't want that outcome, because we don't want to become like the poet. If we read this last bit of the last stanza, is that what it's called in poems? It says that basically the raven is still sitting. In other words, the omen, the plagued messenger, is still sitting there. To this day is like the indication. and his eyes have all the seemings of a demon's that is dreaming. And the lamplight or just means over, the lamplight or him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. So his shadow is lying on the floor, and that's sort of it's just adding to the dramatization of the death, the looming death, the destruction, and otherwise calamity that illuminates from the raven. And he says, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, meaning the shadow of the raven, shall be lifted nevermore. He ends the poem with nevermore, and it's just so beautiful, man. It's so good. It's just so good. So the shadow, I can't get into. Okay, this is the one thing I'll get into. So the shadow from the raven is covering the man, and that's to say that the omen or the cause, whatever we link to the association of our depression, crushes us, and we abide under its shadow where we lay there helpless. And when you're in the midst of that helplessness, you do believe that you shall be lifted nevermore. You might even believe that you deserve it. And I think that might not be an exception for the case of the poet here. And yeah, that's just deep. So yeah, I love this poem. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for your attention. The scripture of the week is Psalms 18:2. This is not the King James Version for the sake of time. The Most High is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My Elohim is my rock, in whom I take refuge. So, as always, I hope that this brings some good edification you guys' way. And yes, with that, I bid thee farewell. I hope that you guys stay safe, stay dangerous, and as always, be wise. Shalom.